Hello and welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem and today we're working with the ice cream collection. I want to share with you another connector that you can add into necklaces, bracelets, chokers, really wherever you can see a use for it. We're going to create another connector featuring these beautiful beads. Now this one was inspired by Croquembouche. That's a French dessert of choux buns filled with cream or ice cream. So let's head down to the board, take a look at the project, and then I'll show you how you can create your very own Croquembouche connector. So here's my Croquembouche connector. Now I don't know if you've ever seen one, but they're very fancy. They're like little miniature choux buns filled with cream or ice cream and then held together in a giant pyramid with lots of spun sugar. And that's what this technique reminded me of. You can create this with much finer wire and then layer it up over and over again to replicate that dessert. But I thought I'd show you how to make it with 20 gauge wire. It's a very popular gauge of wire and it's one that we most oftenly have in our collection. So I created a little bangle with these glorious ice cream toned beads. They are so pretty and sparkly. Let's pop those just on the dish out of the way. But the star of the show today is this beauty. It's a rice shaped bead and it has half coating on it, which lends this absolutely spectacular sparkle. In terms of the wire I'm using, I have a 24-inch length of 20 gauge wire. And what we're going to do to begin with is just warm through the first couple of inches or so, slide our beautiful bead on, and then around about 1.5 inches from one end, I'm going to turn a right angle bend and create a little loop to act as a connection point. So I'm going to use my memory wire finishing pliers again. They are an absolute favourite. They just don't get out of my hands really. I've created that loop to begin with, so let's firm that up and then create a wrapped loop to make that nice and secure. Now I'm going to go for around about 3 wraps or so with that 1 to 1.25 inches of wire. Doesn't really matter if you need to trim a little bit away, but I am trying to be thrifty. So let's just pop that in the scrap pot, and then we need to ensure that that end section is nice and smooth. So let's just take that sticky uppy bit and smooth it down. Give that a very gentle little squish. We are going to add a little bit of rigidity to that loop. If you can hear the wire banging, it's quite a long piece of wire to work with. So I'm just going to tighten up that spiral and make sure that I'm happy with that before we go any further. If I bring the bead down into position, you can see that there's a very large drill aperture to this bead. I love just spinning them around, to be honest. And there we go. So you could work with a slightly heavier wire, but it does make it just a tiny bit trickier to get those beautiful fluid lines. Now I'm going to show you how you can recreate this exact piece with 1 layer of spun sugar. But then I'm going to carry on and just add as many layers as I can for my 24 inches of wire. So I'm going to hold across that wire, turn a little right angle, and we're going to create a second connection point. At the end of this video, I'm also going to show you an alternative way that you can connect this into jewellery. So let's get that squished down flat. The wire I'm working with is a raw copper, which is in fact very fluid and very easy to use. So I would recommend using a softer to a medium temper wire for this project. So a little bit of a squish to make that nice and strong, but not where the wires cross over. And then we're going to fill in just a little bit. So let's go for 3 or 4 wraps around that central core. Taking care not to put a notch in that bead, I'm just going to tighten up those spirals to make sure that it matches the other end. And now the fun part begins. So I am right dominant, so I'm going to start working on the left hand side. If you're left dominant, you may prefer to invert this procedure. So what we need to do is just gently warm through just a couple of times the first 6 or so inches of wire. And what we're going to do is, it doesn't really matter where this goes because it will be able to move for a little while. So I'm just going to gently curve the wire around over about the first facet junction just here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divisions. And I'm just going to start by putting my thumb down over the top of that wire and drawing a loop around. So I want that to sit over that first junction between the first layer of facets and the second layer of facets. And then I'm going to bring that wire all the way over. So I've flipped this around for now, so that we're working from right to left, so you can see whichever way is better for you, that's how you need to do it. I'm going to flip it back over now. And what we've got is a little loop, and then the wire continues wending its way. So I'm going to do a loop in the opposite direction now. So if I put my thumb down over that segment, draw the wire back around, I'm going to switch grips again, draw the wire all the way around, and it's going to bang into everything now as I bring it all the way around past all of the lighting and the microphone and everything else. So you can see we've got this kind of slightly open loop, and I'll just draw it away from the bead for a second. What I want to do is to have that pass of wire that's against my finger go over the top of that first loop, and because we warmed that wire, it's very keen to do what we want it to do, which is lovely because very few things in life happen like that. So we've got our second little loop in position, and you can see that the wire is now coming down again. It's gone up, done a little loop, come down. So we're going to start bending that back in the opposite direction. So we're always kind of shifting from one side to the other. And what you can do, if it's easier for you, is keep the wire stationary and move the bead around. So there's a number of different techniques, but we're switching backwards and forwards, up and down like the waves on the ocean. Sorry if that made you feel seasick. So we've got a little loop in the middle of that section of wire, and I'm going to go for a fourth one, and using this size of bead, which is so delightful to have access to, and this 20 gauge wire, 4 loops just seems to look aesthetically pleasing. So I'm going to add in my final loop on this little traverse of wire. Draw that all the way around, and you can pull it away from the bead a little bit if you need to, just to get that wire sitting over the top. And then what we're going to do is allow it to continue. So you've gone up, done a little loop, come down, done a little loop, gone up, little loop, down. So the wire is now naturally travelling up again. So we're going to take it over the top of the connection point at the end where we've added that wrapped loop. So if I just flip this over, because again it's going to be easier for me to do most of the heavy lifting, so to speak, with my right hand, as I'm right dominant. I'm going to pinch those little beautiful wavy spirals and loops into position, and then I'm going to draw the wire all the way around just once. If you want to just have that single line of loops, as I have in my example just here, and that will sit away from the skin, so that will cause the least irritation. If you are sensitive, if you have touch sensitivity, you may not particularly want lots of pieces of wire against your skin. However, if you're not fussed, we can add more layers, or you can go for on the top and on the sides. So there's lots of options in how you can make this your very own design. So let's pop that croquembouche back onto the plate over to one side, and I'll show you what you would do. Continue to wrap so that you've covered that first layer of spirals, and then bring the tail of wire to the underside, trim away and smooth down as we did at the very first connection. But what I'm going to do is to bring this around another time, and I'm going to add another layer of spun sugar. That's how I like to think of it. Obviously it's wire, please don't eat it. So I'm going to just take the wire as to where it wants to naturally travel, and it feels like it's sort of on the up wave at the moment. So if I pop my thumb over the top, and again, whichever is easier, you can move the wire or you can move the bead. Probably for me today, I'm just going to move the bead because it means that the wire bangs into fewer things. We've gone up, we've done a little loop, now we're coming down. So I need to switch direction again and add in another layer of beautiful fluid loops. Now, it's very warm here today in the UK, which is delightful. Summer has finally arrived. However, if it is a cold month when you're watching this, or you are somewhere where it's cold, you may need to just re-warm that wire a little bit to help with the fluidity of this design. If you find that your loop is too far over to the right, you can simply roll that along a little bit and it will move further to the left. So let's see where we're going. We're on an up stroke now. So let's pop a thumb over the top, draw the bead round in your fingers, or you can move the wire, whichever is your preference. Now if you get 3 loops in the design as you're moving over and you think that looks lovely, go for 3. There is no rules, you can do exactly as you please. And I'm just going to add 1 more small loop just at the end here. And if I do this without my fingers underneath, you'll see that working with raw copper wire, or any wire that you've taken the time to soften by running it between your thumb and forefinger, that forms really easily. So we're on an up motion, so I need to take that up and over the top of that end segment, and you can see here that I've got 2 passes of wire adding to that spun sugar feel on this dessert inspired ice cream collection connector. So if I pinch that into position, draw that wire all the way around, now I have the option to come back a 3rd time, and I'll show you we've got about 10 inches of wire left, so we've got plenty of wire to add a 3rd pass. Now on this occasion the wire seems to be coming on the downward stroke, so I'm just going to allow that to do whatever feels most fluid and most natural. So that means that the wire is now coming up, put my thumb into position, turn the bead or turn the wire, whichever you prefer, and it looks like I've made that a little bit too close to the left hand side. Now if that happens, you can very gently bring that away. Just by rotating the wire around, you can move that slightly more over to the right hand side, so you have control over where those loops sit. Even if it feels like you sometimes don't have control of the wire, it definitely will listen to you. Just tell it what you want it to do. So there's my 3rd loop for this occasion. I'm going to allow 1 more swooping loop to occur, bring that all the way around, and I'll show you how much wire I've got left. So let's just pull that nice and neatly into position. That looks like a really good spot for me, and I've still got a good 5 inches of wire remaining. So if I wanted to use this as home decor, for instance, I could absolutely add those layers of spun sugar or croquembouche design all the way over the top. However, I'm going to use this in jewellery, so what I'm going to do is to finish with my 3rd layer of spun sugar, draw that wire. You can see it's coming down, so we're just going to allow that to dictate where the wire goes. And I'm going to take that over the top of the preceding wraps of wire and take it to the underside and trim away. Now we still have a good 4 or 5 inches of wire there, which we could have used to create another layer. Overall, I'm quite happy with how that has turned out. So I could add this into the bangle design that I created earlier, which is an 18 gauge wire with these gorgeous ice cream inspired beads, just threaded on with wrapped loops at either end. Into those wrapped loops I added these little lobster clasps, so I can use this as interchangeable jewellery. I can pop out my little croquembouche bead and add in anything that I desire. So what I'm going to do with this one is show you an alternative to making a hard bangle, which is to reutilise that bracelet from when we were working with the amethyst collection. So 2 lengths of chain with a beautiful toggle clasp at one end, and then I have these golden toned split rings which I got off of some chain reaction. So I'm just going to add that through the loop and again at the other end. So this will now be opened by the toggle clasp on the opposite side to that croquembouche connector. So let's allow that to sit into position. This would look absolutely beautiful in either orientation. You could centralise it in a choker. You could have it as a drop pendant. You don't have to put anything in the lower loop, although if you have little sections of chain which are just hanging around doing nothing, they make really lovely tassels. So there's 2 ways to use your croquembouche connector, featuring the ice cream collection, and I absolutely adore these. I think they're so sparkly and so much fun. This is Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem, and I hope that you've enjoyed today's tutorial. Bye for now.